Good morning, everyone.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, Adrian. Good, good.
Good. Enjoying this lovely weather?
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing. I've been out in my garden watering everything, though. It's been so dry.
Yeah, and it's a little scary, this advisory too for inclement dry weather.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. All right. Bye-bye.
Good morning.
Good morning. Love your background. Which tree is it? Do you know?
It's a big leaf maple, Eastern macrophyllum, that used to be Willamette National Forest
Oh,
near Brighton Bush, but with the fires last season, I'm pretty sure it
oh my God, sad.
doesn't look like this anymore if it's still
So
there.
fabulous. Yeah, one of the things I like to paint is singular, sort of spectacular trees with a lot of character. That would be a cool one.
Greg and Damon will have to talk with you about the Heritage Tree Program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I of course know about it because I've done those walks where you try to find them for a long time, but yeah, I don't know the details behind it.
It's a fun program to join, fun community to join.
Yeah, I know there was some program to have painters, right, come and do something with singular trees. Was that through?
I believe last year.
Yeah.
Separate group that chose to do that, yes, recently, in an effort to cultivate and save trees that they felt were under risk.
Oh, that's right. Was, yeah.
But yet, Adrienne, there are 350 heritage trees, give or take, so you have many opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. Now, did you personally take the photo that's behind you, or?
I did. Lying on my back. It's great.
Would you mind sending it to me?
Not at all. Not
Okay.
at all. There he is.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Just give it one more minute, maybe, just before we get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I am just getting my feet under me here, jumping from a meeting to a meeting, as many of you might be doing as well. Welcome to our springtime, fully in spring here. Urban Forestry Commission meeting. Delightful to see all of your faces. Really extra delighted today because we have some couple of new commissioners that we get to know, and we're going to have a chance to get to know them better. I think you've seen a little bit about them in an email that Brian sent. But before we get into that, I want to just make sure we're keeping the agenda going here and open it up to public comments. See if there's any public comments, as we usually do.
Yeah, I know we have at least one. I'm going to let Jeff into the meeting so he can share.
Great.
Hello.
Hi, Jeff.
Yes.
Welcome.
Okay, I can't see myself, so I don't know what I look like or if I'm in the frame, but is that okay?
We can hear you.
All right. So thanks for having this public portion of the testimony. I am a longtime lover of trees. I have a heritage tree in our backyard. We have a European beech. It's just massive. It's amazing. Come by and see it sometime. I'd like to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities with Streets 2035 and some ideas. I shared some of these ideas in the letter that may have gone to some of you, but I just wanted to take this portion of public testimony to do that. The neighborhood I live in is Sunnyside, and we have a lot of very narrow planting strips. Sometimes they're only 18 inches. Sometimes they are non-existent. When I was a neighborhood coordinator for Friends of Trees in this neighborhood, we did have a program, and we were able to get about 30 to 40 trees planted in these narrow strips by having a concrete cutout to expand the planting area. So we would cut into the sidewalk and end up with a 30-inch wide cutout. And Brian, are folks seeing the presentation, or where are we on that?
I can share it real quick. Yeah.
Okay.
I have it pulled up.
If we can go to page 2.
Sure thing.
So we patched together funds from Southeast Uplift grants and the Neighborhood Association to lower the cost to homeowners. And basically this, I think, is a tree of life. This is a cutout that was made for this tree. This tree is done very well. Some trees have done better based on their profile. This has kind of a nice columnar profile. And so we have brought trees, more trees to the street than was possible. If we go to slide 3, this is just around the corner from me. This is several crab apples, I believe. You can see how nice an atmosphere this creates. This is the exact same planting scenario. These were planted about 10 years ago, and they were so inspirational. If we go, let's see, if you look down further, there's some new sidewalk ahead of the pedestrian. Let's go to the next slide, not slide 4. Yeah, see, you see 2 cutouts ahead of the pedestrian, and that was actually part of new construction. That structure there that's behind the fence was infill. It's a duplex, and there's, since it's close to a bus stop, there's no required parking. And so new developers actually replicated this idea of the cutouts and put 2 trees that really are very columnar and haven't leafed out yet. If we can go to slide 5. But, challenges remain in the neighborhood. This construction just on Hawthorne down the block from me, there's only 1 tree. And we can see across the street is an older construction that's about, I think, 15 years old or so, and they get a nice big tree. I think folks who live in small units and apartments or condos, they are lessening their environmental impact. They deserve to have some trees outside their window. I know this is exactly the kind of things that Streets 35 gets to and addresses. Finally, let's go to slide 6. We have a notion sometimes of protecting big trees in certain places. There have been certain developments that do this. And this is the famous example. I think it's the Watson tree on the PSU campus, where we do treasure a tree and build around it. But as the prior photo shows, we also have to make those opportunities when we build, if there are other circumstances that prevent the usual alignment of trees in the right of way. So now I'd like to get to slide 7 and my basic kind of pitch, which is an annual right of way fee. And basically it's like, we kind of have this thing now where homeowners make some of the decisions on the right of way, a lot of them in residential neighborhoods. And we kind of get this tug and pull between the homeowners, the city, and different aspirations. So my idea is like, let's take a more holistic look and approach. And no one likes a new tax or fee, but I think if you had one that was based on the per foot, based on the private property and how it abuts the public right away, we could make a fee that also has a lot of benefits. And the benefits, if homeowners paid this fee, or property owners, would be that the city would assume the costs for all sidewalk repairs, regardless of the cause. I canvassed for Friends of Trees, and probably the number one objection was, I don't want to have to pay for sidewalk repairs. So this takes that off the table and gives homeowners kind of an insurance policy. But it would also mean that we would have a source of funding for the full life cycle of tree care, which is really critical in the long term, because we always have this short-term need to care for trees on a year-by-year basis, and the long-term need to plan what the canopy is actually going to be like. So the idea of this fee is it covers all these things that we rely on, kind of a mosaic of volunteer efforts. And I'm a volunteer. I volunteer for Friends of Trees, other things, but I think we're seeing in our society limits on volunteerism. And sometimes our problems and our aspirations require a more government-based approach. And I think this is one of them. So the idea is to give and take a little. So we'd also eliminate any of the individual leaf collection fees. We'd replace that all with a citywide program of getting the leaves. And again, that gives a consistent response to these kinds of environmental things. So this is, again, the idea that the right of way is to be used as a public good. And I'll close with slide 8. But the most important thing is we use this fee to achieve equity. And we would do that by having some benchmarks. I know we have like citywide goals on canopy, but specifically, I'd like to see minimum tree canopy targets for public right-of-ways, and only public right-of-ways by neighborhood. And then also maybe a somewhat lower minimum tree canopy by block. So the idea is that, yes, on some blocks, we're gonna have circumstances where we can't maybe meet the target, but within the neighborhood, we meet the target. But that every neighborhood has this minimum baseline. And we would also exclude parks so as not to skew the actual right-of-way measurement. So that's just my idea I'm throwing out in regards to Streets 35. And I thank you all for your time.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Really interesting. Commissioners, any clarifications, responses, thoughts? Greg?
Well, I want to thank Jeff. Jeff is actually a near neighbor to where I used to live. So we are involved in many of those plantings and in some prunings as well. I have to bring up that I think another real need, and I mentioned it last meeting for Streets 2035, is those narrow planting strips. Most of the plantings that Jeff highlighted would not be allowed now, even with the cutouts, because they're still really narrow. And that was really a choice that Jen made, or Urban Forestry made, based on their perceptions of how those trees mature. So there really is just a problem in some of these older established neighborhoods with narrow rights of way and, narrow room for sidewalks and street trees.
If I could just, it reminds me of one thought I had along those lines, is that in Sunnyside, we had a Green Streets program, but the focus of that with BES was on stormwater. And so we, on a couple of those streets, we had very small planters added. And that was one possibility. But if with BES, in some of those scenarios, we could expand the focus beyond just pure stormwater measurements, there would be some opportunities to create tree plantings that way.
All right. I didn't see who put their hand up first, but can I go Megan and then Daniel?
I'm going to defer to Daniel because I know he went first. I'll go after.
Okay, we'll go Daniel, Megan, and then Damon.
So thank you, Jeff, for bringing that up. This reminds me, this is exactly the way that the city of Washington, D.C. handles it. In their tax assessment every year, they do a right-of-way assessment, and that's how they pay for their street tree program. This is something we, in the policy committee, we were looking at a number of different cities and how they were able to achieve better, street tree canopy. And if you're interested in looking at some other cities with that same idea that you had, I thought Washington, D.C. had an excellent way of implementing this. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Thank you.
Megan?
Yeah, my comment is somewhat along the same line. I appreciate just creativity also of ideas. This is really helpful. And I, of course, whenever someone is proposing a tax, am a bit curious about some of the data or thought behind what that tax that would be imposed is. So I didn't know, Jeff, if there had been any thought to what the actual taxation schedule would be, or if it's still too much in a preliminary idea stage.
Well, it is a very preliminary idea. And so I was thinking of something of $1 to $2 per foot. I guess you would have to reverse engineer it too to see what the demands are, and maybe commercial footage might be higher. So it is. I'm thinking like if you pay a leaf fee now, that's $30. So if you pay $100, but you get all this other benefits, maybe that doesn't seem so bad. It is a density friendly proposal, because if you have more people abutting that right away, the cost per person is less. So that's as far as not being able to actually begin to calculate how much. I guess that would be one of my next steps, is maybe try to find out how much right away would actually be involved in this.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we're public comments here. We don't want to get into the nuts and bolts and get into the nitty gritty here. So let's keep this at a generally high level. I had Damon and then Barbara.
Jeff, I just want to thank you for the creative approach to this. And I think that, we definitely need creativity as we move forward with Streets 2035. We need to think outside the box and create methods of making tree acceptance a little bit more acceptable. It still doesn't get at the idea of that one slide you showed with the single solitary tree on Hawthorne. We need to prioritize trees as green infrastructure, and maybe this might be a way to do that. But we just need to get those trees in the ground. So thank you.
Great. Barbara. See if you can unmute, and there we go. Good.
Good. Okay. I also wanted to thank you, Jeff, for coming in with an idea as opposed to just a problem. But what I wanted to say is that I've been on the appeals board for over 7 years now. And one of the issues that continues to come up is I can't afford the burden of sidewalk maintenance. And I think this would go a long way toward that. And I also, which is one of the, I hate trees because things that comes up. The other, or I hate this tree because the other one is the leaf issue. You know, there are leaves on my lawn now, and you know, I want my lawn to look perfect or whatever. But the other thing is that this could maybe be part of the issue of people not maintaining their street trees with the city taking over that role. Because that's another issue, and I've seen that in appeals, not to get into anything specific, but where a tree has been poorly maintained, all of a sudden now it does qualify for removal. Whereas if it's been well maintained, it may not be potentially fitting the code for removal. So it seems to me that this idea has a lot of tentacles that could improve the tree canopy and the equity and the whole density issue, which we're faced with as well. Plus, potentially, there might be a way to tie in climate change. And, you know, it just seems to go a long ways toward a lot of issues that are pretty high on priorities for us.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't mention climate change, so that's definitely front and center.
Right. Thanks, commissioners. And thank you, Jeff. This is great. We want to keep this conversation going. Perhaps it's something the policy committee can think about a little bit more and continue fleshing out. It sounds like they already have started looking into this. So thank you for your comments. Really appreciate you coming in. I want to transition to our new commissioners who I know have to leave here in about 10 minutes, but I want to give both Adrian and Leah a chance to say a few words. I will say, as being on the recruitment committee for these two commissioners that were brought on board, I will say, Adrian, Leah, you are long awaited. Commissioners are very delighted to have you on board, and we are delighted that you're interested in participating in this. And yeah, big ups to you. Thank you for taking the consideration of the Urban Forestry Commission. We know you bring a lot to this. Adrian, sounds like you've been deep in community engagement outside of your day job or your professional life that has spanned many decades. And Leah, I know you're deep into interest in engagement with education and outreach, and love to hear a few words from you about your interest in the commission. Really, we want to try to make this as soft of a landing as possible, and really kind of bring you in, engage with you. I think you might be hearing, as we chatted last time, about follow-ups with you. Love to grab a virtual beverage with you and kind of chat about how we could better engage you in the commission. We're a small group, so it really lends itself to a lot of interaction. So do you want to say a few words about your interest in the commission and kind of how you might see yourself potentially participating? Adrian, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start actually. Yes, thank you so much for having me. I could tell this is going to be, a real learning opportunity, and hopefully, an opportunity for me to contribute. History and public health and environmental health, and just have been very passionate about our tree canopy and our access to recreation. I continue to work part-time as a physician, but I'm also a Portland Parks and Rec swim teacher. And, so have some firsthand view of just how important it is to have access to beautiful environment and movement on a day-to-day basis. So again, fascinating to even hear the beginning of your meeting today and the interesting public comments, and look forward to doing anything that I can do to contribute.
Great, thanks so much, Adrian. Yeah, sounds. Do you have a minute to be able to? I know you've got your hands full there.
This wasn't supposed to be
to have a few words.
Kiddo joining in kind of thing, but that happens sometimes.
We're an age-friendly group here.
Maybe next time.
Okay. Understandable, no problem. We'll follow up with you. And there's little bios that Brian sent, both for Adrian and Leah, that I encourage you to take a look at. We were really impressed with your application, and of course with the potential that you could engage us not only from education outreach and environmental health, but also with potential and appeals and other things that are bread and butter for the commission. So just as we're bringing on new commissioners, I just want to take a moment to recognize Joe Paraski, who is somebody who's recently left his physical body and is was a former chair of the Urban Forestry Commission. I've known Joe at Portland State University since I arrived, and he was one of my mentors in kind of getting more familiar with the urban canopy here in Portland. He did some of the earliest studies of tree canopy that we know of systematically and through the geography department at PSU, and he'll be sorely missed. I know there's a discussion happening online about a memorial and things like that. So we'll try to keep you up to date as to anything that might emerge from that. But just really amazing spirit, amazing advocate, and stalwart enthusiast for all things urban canopy, and really going to miss him tremendously. Let's keep conversation going. We're a little bit behind. I wanted to spend a little moment on the minutes. Keep ourselves up to date with conversations that we've had, and also to jog your memory of the things that we've talked about. So maybe we just take a few minutes to review the minutes, and I'll need a motion for approval and a vote. And if there are any edits or revisions that are needed as well, please take a minute here and check in on the minutes that Brian sent. And just a reminder, this is for February, Brian, is what I have, right? Yep. All right, do we have a motion? Looks like Greg and Barbara put up their hands at almost the exact same time. Greg?
Well, I actually have an edit or a correction.
Okay.
It's the last item, the heritage trees.
Yep.
The bold part, it should be heritage tree 191.
Mm.
And then the middle bullet, I'd like to have everything after Greg presented the details of the heritage trees struck, because basically it's incorrect. And I just want to acknowledge, as I have to the committee, but to the commission, that I did not take this to the committee. We've had COVID.
Okay.
The committee had not met for over a year. We have met since then, and I apologize to them, but the tree, as you remember seeing it, I mean, really had like the trunk and like one branch going up. And our feeling for the Heritage Tree Committee had just been that people's lives were so overturned, and there was so much more important that we were just sort of suspending things. So we are picking up. The committee did not disagree with the ones that were able to meet by phone with you know, it would have been obvious to them as well. But I just want to acknowledge that I did not do the proper procedure to you guys as well. So basically, I just presented it, and I personally agree with urban forestry.
Okay, so it's a friendly amendment just to strike that language. Okay, Barbara, you're muted. Okay.
I just wanted to make a motion. I had reviewed the minutes and I had sent a correction to Brian, and I'm assuming that he got that. So I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected by myself. It was one line. I don't have the minutes in front of me because I have the agenda up, but it was right above the heritage trees. There's one line in there. It's missing a word. And so I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes with the corrections as submitted by myself and by Greg.
Okay, great. Are there any other revisions or any modifications other commissioners have? Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Anybody second? Greg seconds. All right, call to vote. All in favor, you can raise your virtual hand or your physical hand in this case. All right, and all opposed? Any abstentions? Megan? Okay, noted. Thanks. All right, so passed. Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to Jen's Forster's report. Jen, are you able to fill us in?
You bet.
And I apologize for shortening your time here. Went a little long with the public comments today.
So how much time do I have now?
I think you could actually, since we have the bylaws discussion, I think we're actually able to take it on to 10, can we say 10:15?
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. I am setting my clock here for 10 minutes to allow 5 for questions at the end.
Okay.
Here we go. Good morning again, commissioners. Hello, good to see you all. And I hope you're enjoying the fine spring weather. I have 11 items, if we can get to them all in the time I've given myself. As I said, with time for questions at the end, just to make it quicker. So first off, kind of a fun thing, seasonal thing. If you're interested in Able, it is a great time to visit the Arboretum and the blooming magnolias, which are lovely. And hopefully you've already been aware of that because it was in the last issue of Tree Bark that just came out yesterday, I think. So this is my friendly reminder that Tree Bark, Urban Forestry's twice monthly newsletter, is full of tree, forest, and local program information. And I recommend you read it. It should be hitting your inboxes. If it's not, let Brian or me know and we can make sure it does. And I typically will not include items from Tree Bark in my report because my assumption is you already have it. And that's out of respect for all of our time, not doing those things again. And that's a good time to also, friendly reminder, if you have requests for future city forester reports, things you see in Tree Bark or things that we haven't talked about at all, whatever, please do bring them my way and I'll try to work them in or address them in some way. Another item, I'm sorry, Tree Bark is created, each edition really created by Gina Dake and Claire Carney. So I wanted to give them recognition for that. I think they do a nice job on it. Another item, moving on. While the weather is sunny and warm and everything is blooming, trees and other plants, it is unusually dry for our region right now. Last weekend, there were 2 fires in Forest Park. Both were small and put out very quickly by Portland Fire Department and caused little damage. But we all in parks and elsewhere in the city are recognizing that risk is quite high right now. And in fact, there's a county fire ban in effect. And we are wondering if this will be an indication of a very stressful, dry and hot summer for trees this year. And right now we're bringing on in urban forestry our seasonal staff to water and care for new trees. trees planted by Urban Forestry and our contractors who also do watering for at least 2 years of establishment care. And this type of establishment care, and especially watering in our current climate crisis, is critical to tree survival, and not just survival, but those trees being able to flourish and grow and thrive and live for many years. If they don't do that, then the planting is largely valueless, right? Getting a tree in the ground is a great start, but it needs to actually persist after that and thrive. So we're also working on some public relations around watering for this summer, and hopefully starting soon with our communications folks in parks. Shifting to another item. I just wanted to, I think they're both gone, but I also wanted to recognize that Adrian and Leah were appointed by council yesterday. We're really glad to have them, of course. And over the coming weeks, we'll be working on onboarding and training so that they are ready to work with all of you as voting members starting next month. Next item, I just wanted to share some upcoming city council dates related to the urban forest and urban forestry's work. So on May 19th, we will be bringing the permitting fee schedule updates to council, and that is on the agenda for today. So we'll more on that later from Brian. Also on May 19th, we will be bringing the annual trust funds report to council, and that was covered with y'all last month, and you advised on that last month. And then on May 26th, we will be bringing the tree code amendments, so-called task 3 item to the council, which you have also already advised on. And as a reminder, this is reporting that high-level scope of work for upcoming tree code amendments and the timeframe for updating the antiquated urban forest management plan, which council did not direct. They did direct the task 3 work. However, urban forestry's added that thanks to the operations levy, and we're of course all really looking forward to that work. Next item, last month, we discussed at this meeting the annual Urban Forestry Trust Funds report content. And I wanted to let you know that subsequent to that discussion, we updated the report to include information on the tree planting and preservation funds that are already committed for new tree establishment care into future years. Remember, that was a discussion point last time around, that it wasn't really clear how much of the overall 4 million and change, well, big change, was not really available. So we clarified that in the report that's going to go to council. And the average expenditure each year on all of the use types, including establishment care of newly planted trees for up to 3 years, is around $900,000, or roughly a quarter of the fund. So if you think about spending that amount ongoing, because we will need to do that, as I said, for watering and other establishment, that's really maximizing the fund's annual use while we're assuring that enough remains to be able to continue planting an establishment into the near future. And the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund, of course, is the only dedicated tree planting and establishment funds that we have in urban forestry. So it's really important for us to keep some of that moving ahead. Next item, in May, so next meeting, we expect Parks Equity and Inclusion Manager Kenya Williams and/or folks from his team to attend the commission to present on Parks' new racial equity lens. And the racial equity lens is a tool to help activate diversity, equity, inclusion, and dismantling racism into all levels of Parks work and the Urban Forestry Commission's work. So I'm really looking forward to having him at the commission next month to introduce that. We're also working on probably a separate meeting for more training on how to apply the lens, and then seeing us use it ongoing. Next item, I had been asked to speak a little bit to summer activities that are coming up. So Youth Conservation Crew Tree Crew, YCC as we call it, that's been around for probably around 15 years now. This summer we'll be doubling the size of that crew to 10 youth with 2 supervisors working with them. And YCC is a paid summer work, career exposure, and work skills development program for high school students that's run by Parks, and Urban Forestry hosts the tree team in that program. Participants in the program have gone on to jobs in the urban forestry fields, including with us, but others as well, arboriculture, related nature care and natural resource type jobs, and education fields, including with, as I said, forestry and parks, but also the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and the private sector, so private companies as well. And that is the point of the program, is to get young folks some exposure and hopefully pique their interest and some skills to continue in our field. So given the success of the program and similar parks programs, with the new operations levy funds, we in parks overall are working on expanding those types of offerings. And a lot of them are being done in partnership with local community groups, especially BIPOC run community groups, to help with recruitment and support for those programs. Other summer activities that will be happening: summer lunch and play, free fitness in the parks, aquatics programs are coming back online, and similar programs will be happening, all of those within the COVID context. So that is still uncertain and things may need to change. However, summer free for all, that's the free movies and concerts and dances in the parks, is not planned to resume this summer. Moving on to another item. I was also asked to give an update on this. So recall that in mid-February, Parks received City Council approval to begin using some of the 5-year operations levy funds early, instead of waiting until November this fall when property taxes are collected. So we have been involved in what we're calling ramping up in parks. And that's really focused on improving our organizational foundation with new staff positions over the next several months in order to use the bulk of the levy funds more effectively over the coming 5 years. In this ramp up period, which runs through November, Urban Forestry is approved to create, recruit, and hire several new positions. And most of the specific job descriptions are still under construction. However, I wanted to share with you the city classifications or types of jobs that we will be recruiting for. We actually have 2 of them open right now, which I'll mention. So those classifications include coordinator 2, supervisors of various sorts, a GIS technician 2, business systems analyst 2, development services technicians 2. They all happen to be 2s. So instead of 1s, they're 2s, they're levels. The development services technicians are what we call the tree techs. So more tree techs. Also, of course, more tree inspectors, arborists, botanic specialists. And right now, there are postings out. We're looking for applications for a planting program supervisor and also tree inspection and preservation supervisors. So please spread the word on that. And I am running out of time, so I'm gonna jump to some last minute things, and other things can wait till later. I have nothing new to report on street tree maintenance project, some of which Jeff Coles was just talking to, things we've covered in that project in the past. I also have nothing new to report on the BES tree planting program realignment or Streets 2035 specifically, but I did want to recognize the work of Bruce and the policy committee and their interest in the Portland Water Bureau's transmission pipe issue. And please know that that continues to be discussed between the bureaus, and I'm hopeful that we will make progress there. I'll conclude with that, Vivek, to allow time for any questions.
We can have this as kind of a open conversation, questions for Jen. Maybe I'll go around and just check with everybody, see if they have any comments. And maybe I'll start in my upper left and kind of circle around. First, I want to start seeing if Megan, if you have any comments. No? Okay. Next, and Jeanette, any comments? No? Daniel, questions, comments, responses to Jen?
Yeah, just a quick question, since this is something that was discussed at a previous meeting, and there was a lot of discussion about the programmatic permits for BES. What's the current state of that? How did that end up?
So that hasn't changed Daniel, and it probably wasn't clear the way I covered it. The situation with BES's tree planting program and realigning that, there hasn't been any change there with that. So BES, as I said last time, has indicated they're not planning to apply to renew the permit. And the permit that exists now, which has covered the planting that's just finished, expires in May.
Expires in May, okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Damon? Nope, okay. Barbara? Nope. How about Bruce?
I guess it's more of a comment. So I'm trying to get information from the Portland Water Bureau as to where those pipes that are 24-inch and larger in diameter are located. Apparently that information is classified because of the Environmental Protection Agency. So I'm trying to get around that by just asking for more general information that doesn't specifically locate where those pipes are, just asking by zip or neighborhood. So we'll see what comes of it, but I suspect it'll take a while.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Greg?
I just have a request, and that would be that we get the updated tree fund report. And then I guess a question to Jen is, does she need any supportive testimony at those council hearings?
Oh, thank you so much for asking that, Greg. Great question. Brian, what is our plan? Brian does all of the council prep, including the runs of show. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for the fee update and the fund report, those are fairly standard items that we bring in, are usually pretty straightforward. But I do think when the task 3 scope of work goes on May 26th, that actually could be a great idea to have some supportive testimony. So let me think about that, and I can send an email out after this meeting for any opportunity there.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Brian.
I'll add to that as well. I'm thinking about Jeff Cole's testimony comment at the beginning of the meeting and the discussion that ensued. You know, my own perspective is that it's usually useful to have some kind of an advocacy strategy and have it timed well and focused around a particular topic that a person or interest group is trying to move. With that said, it occurs to me that if you all wanted to, or others like Jeff, you always can avail yourselves of the public comment period at council. And those are each week. And they have a process just like we do to put in for time to comment. And many of you have done that before. But that is, you know, they're the ones who make a lot of the decisions we talk about here rather than it being in my authority. So some food for thought.
All right. Great. Thank you all. Thanks, Jen, for that summary. There's a lot of stuff going on as usual, especially as thinking about hiring in this. I was really, I was noting your fire comment because it's exactly the thoughts I've been having as well. And in fact, on a walk to the park with the dogs the other day, there was a bark fire just in the median strip, and it was smoking at first and smelled it. And as we were walking by, it was kind of like, oh my goodness, this just isn't going out. We first put some rocks on it thinking it was not a big deal, but then it just started really still going, and a half hour later it was still going. So we ended up having to go get water and pour all through the area. So it's yeah, it's great reminder for us to stay vigilant and watchful of things around even in the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Quick comment, Barbara? Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick question that I should have asked before and I forgot. Were those human caused fires or were they just natural? Do you know?
Yeah, they were human caused by campers. And there are a lot of campers these days, and that's probably not a great combination we have going on.
Okay. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. I'd like to transition to give Brian some time on the bylaws conversation. And we started this, as you may recall, but we're going to get into the, I'm sorry, not bylaws, fee schedule. Yeah, we're getting to bylaws later, but I keep thinking about but we're on the fee schedule. We started this conversation as well, and we're going to kind of follow up here. And Brian, like 20 minutes.
Sounds great. And yeah, just so everyone knows, we were expected to have an appeal hearing today from 11 to 11:30, which is why the agenda was a little bit short. That appeal hearing has been rescheduled, so we're reclaiming that time to return to the question of the new bylaws. But yeah, I'm here to talk about the fee schedule. So this is, of course, something we do every year. The fee schedule is, sorry, I have a pop up here. The fee schedule is something we bring to City Council every year. And for those who are probably pretty familiar at this point, but fees really are the way that we fund a lot of what urban forestry does. It's we divide them into development and non-development, and city policy is that development fees should really be at full cost recovery. So whatever the cost of the services that urban forestry is providing, the fee for that service should cover all of our costs. On the non-development side, we do not try to achieve full cost recovery. It would often be the cost would be prohibitive for a lot of people to actually go through the permit route, and we obviously want to be encouraging people to go through that instead of creating a cost burden. So I will share this fee schedule was posted to the website, but I'll share my screen as well. So this document shows on that first column with the numbers with the strike through, that those are the current fees, and then in red are the fees that we're proposing for next year. And this would be for the next fiscal year starting July 1st. On the development side, we are proposing a 5% increase on pretty much every fee. Some increases are a little bit larger, but generally 5%. And that's mainly just to keep pace with annual increases in staff and rent and all the other costs that go into this. You will see that the public works fee, public works is a process when there's a private development where the right of way is being substantially changed. That's a pretty complicated process because really every infrastructure bureau is involved. PGE could be involved because there's a lot going on in the right of way. So that's a really complex process. And we're essentially taking that public works fee, which was a flat fee, and breaking it up into 3, which is really consistent with how PBOT and Water Bureau and other infrastructure bureaus set their fee. So that's why you're seeing a little more substantive changes there. But in general, we're just doing a 5% across the board increase in fees. And we know that's pretty consistent with what other bureaus are doing. BDS, Water Bureau, and BES are all proposing 5%. I do, well, first I'll go down, and then on the non-development side, we're really not making much of a change there, and we're actually removing some fees that we don't that we never really charge. So not much of an update on the non-development side. Things like the tree removal application fee are staying the same. I do want to make a note that as we've been talking about development and the need to have full cost recovery on development fees, with the operations levy coming on board, it's really providing an opportunity for parks to sort of reassess the financial management structures that we have in place. And it allows us to update the actual models we use to determine what is the cost to provide some of these services. So we are expecting, we know that many of our costs for development are not actually included in the model that we have. So we're definitely aware that we are undercharging for this, and so over the next year or two, we will be reviewing that model, and it will likely result in a sort of phased increase larger phased increases in development fees over the next few years so that we can fully reach cost recovery. And the Portland Bureau of Transportation is actually undergoing something similar right now. They haven't updated their model in 30 years, and they've recognized they're really undercharging for their services as well. So that's not something that really affects this year, but it's something we know is going to be happening over the next year or two. So want to make a note of that. Otherwise, that's really all I have on that. I'll stop and see if anyone has any question on this.
All right. Open this up as well. Feel free to put your hands up on this. We'll go Bruce and Megan.
Yes, my question is on the non-development fee for chemical applications. $150. I don't know if that's per application, per site, or just for site. The other thing, it's kind of a, I was a pesticide applicator for a private company for 12 years in the city, and did a lot of treatments on street trees using materials that are registered with the state. I was a licensed applicator. I understand regulations have changed since I was working in the field, but $150 will double the cost, at least, of those applications that go to some homeowners. And it is feasible, possible that a homeowner that has 2 Paul Scarlet hawthorn trees that are no longer on the approved list, but were when they were planted, and they're notorious for leaf disease, and so they should be sprayed with a fungicide. If the homeowner wished to have those sprayed with an organic material, there is no organic fungicide on the list of approved materials. My understanding is the IPM program at Parks and Recreation comes up with a list of approved chemicals, regardless of whether the applicator uses a material that's registered with the state. I have reservations about why this is being done, and I certainly think the cost is a little spendy. It's not spendy if you're treating an elm tree for Dutch elm disease, where you may be paying well over $1,000 per tree just for the treatment. But I think this is overkill, and what I've heard is it's a reaction to the bee kill that occurred from the use of the synthetic, was it the pyrethroids or whatever? But so I just have reservations. I understand it's been in existence for a while, so it's likely not going to change, but I really think it's, I'm not sure how appropriate it is. Thank you.
Any responses to that,
Yes.
Ryan or Jen?
I'll speak to that, and then if Rick has anything to add, that's fine. Rick Faber's also here for
Okay.
the topic. But yeah, so Bruce, that's not per tree. It's per permit. It can include multiple trees. We follow the park's integrated pest management policies in those. And it has been out there for a long time. All of our tree inspectors are also, and arborists are also certified pesticide applicators, and they get refreshed regularly on that. And the reason we do it is that it is our responsibility to manage street trees, and we don't want people doing things to them that are negative. And there is a cost, a service. When we provide that service to pay for the inspector to look at the situation, review the application, and approve it or not, that's what it costs us to do. Actually, as Brian said, it's probably a little bit under what it actually costs us to do. Rick, would you add anything to that? If you're really listening.
Here we go. Here we go. Yes, I'm really listening. I was just not used to Zoom. So what I do want to add to that is that I personally will be working with the IPM Parks manager. It's on my work plan to do that probably in the fall of this year, to start a conversation and to fully integrate the tree permitting process into that parks IPM plan, to make sure that there's no oversights. and to possibly flesh out more options in that list. When I do get to that, I will absolutely make sure I bring it back to this group since there is a vested interest.
And thanks for bringing that up, Bruce's great comments and questions. Thanks, Rick.
All right, Megan.
Hi, so my comments are also about non-development fees within this, which I know we're not fully talking about. I just want to bring up, I know we've talked about this in the past, but the increase to $100 for the removal application, I know, and I want to just recognize upfront that I know we're not doing cost recovery. I'm very aware of that. And I know that we have financial hardship, like applications that, you know, folks that qualify could go through. But I have just heard from so many people that are just opting to not remove trees that in all likelihood should be removed because of the cost. One of them is even my neighbor. She has a tree that feels like is literally about to fall down and is a street tree. And when I told her the process and that it was going to be $100, she has just decided to not remove it. And so I know that it's kind of this stuck in the middle place. I just want to continue to bring it up because I don't want people to not do it because of cost being prohibitive. And so I just want to make certain I put that note in as we continue to evaluate it. And as we move forward, if there's continued ways to think about creative options around that.
You want to respond to that, Jen? And then we can go to, I think Damon had his hand up, but it's down now. I don't know if Damon, you want to follow up since you were after Megan and then Daniel.
Yeah, Megan, I couldn't agree more. And I think all of us would say that in forestry. There are other avenues for something that's truly hazardous and right away. If it's reported and it is an emergency, it gets removed as such. And same thing if something is a nuisance, so not yet to the level of a true imminent safety hazard. So those are other avenues for how that's done. But ultimately, my strong sense is that what we heard about at the beginning of the meeting about proactive street tree maintenance that is funded by the city is where this all needs to end up. And until we get there, we will continue to have these types of challenges. And we do a lot of work ferreting between different ways of addressing these within urban forestry each day that I think alone is a great expense that would go away to a degree if we had real street tree maintenance.
Yeah, and I'll just add that one of the things within the operation, the urban forestry's plan for new operations levy funding is exploring how do we reduce fees as a burden to complying with Title 11, and part of that is making the hardship program permanent so that we're waiving fees for people who can't afford it, but we're looking at other ways as well. So that's definitely on our list. Yeah, thanks.
All right, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks, especially for some of the comments and explanations. This is helpful. I think we've all seen in the last few years the fees go up and up and up every year, and understand that the goal here has been stated as cost recovery, but I'm wondering if there has been much thought into figuring out how to reduce what the cost is to the city so that the fees don't have to get raised to make it equal to that cost. For instance, things like if some of these are based on 2 city employees being involved, let's say in a pre-application conference or something like that, is there any thought in reducing the number of city employees that are involved in each of these different tasks so that the cost wouldn't have to be so high? So I'm just wondering what kind of thought's been done on that side of things rather than just raising the costs, the fees to equal the cost. Thanks.
Vivek, you want me to respond?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Please.
Great comment, Daniel. And to me, at the core of managing a program, no matter what type, is making sure you're efficient with your resources. And especially if they're public resources, they're not yours. So you must use them the best way possible and be transparent. We do that routinely. I'm pretty confident that we can't slim things down any more than we have already. In fact, we know that we really do not have enough staff to do the work that's out there. And so that in a way makes sure we're super efficient, maybe over efficient. We know we're not doing the things that we should be doing in some cases because we just can't. So yeah, I appreciate the comment, and we do those types of reviews routinely. And we're about as efficient as we can get, given the city code and policies that are not in our control that we have to work within.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Brian. Okay. Anything else on the fee schedule?
I just unmuted Matt. Matt, I'm sorry. Vivek just let me know that your hand was raised, and I wasn't sure if that was for this item or not. Sorry about that. So I've added you to the meeting if you have anything to add real quick. Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay, it looks like probably not.
We can come back
Sure.
to you, Matt. Go with Greg.
I wanted to sort of echo and support what Megan said in a way. I mean, we want to be really careful about tree removals. Obviously, from watching some of the appeals committee work, there's people that are often eager to remove trees, and we want to avoid that unless it's necessary. But, you know, in a way, I feel like some removals are really kind of part of getting the new planting permit. And sometimes we might be precluding. It's sort of like you got to remove a tree to plant a tree. And so one of them is a high price and the other one is zero. So again, I recognize that staff has got to look at those trees. But
If I could just clarify, Greg, we actually call that permit the remove replant permit. So every permit process that triggers mitigation of some sort, planting is a type of mitigation, another is payment, is included in that process. It's not a separate permit for a separate fee. So in almost all cases, when somebody gets a removal permit, there's going to be planting or mitigation payment or some of both involved.
right. I mean, I have a nearby neighbor to my former house who literally, rather than removing his tree, just badly prunes it year after year. And I've sent it to the tree line several times, and I think that they must just be frustrated with this particular person, but unable to get him to just actually remove the tree and then replant it.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Barbara.
Thank you. That goes back to the comment that I made earlier about, you know, maybe the idea that was brought to us is not the absolute way to go, but I do think we need to continue soliciting ideas or looking for ideas and being creative and all that, because I think this is an issue we have to resolve. The other thing that I would say is that, and, you know, having done appeals for over 7 years, I would have to say that the non-development is not cost recovery. And to get the amount of review and the amount of time and the amount of attention and the discussions and all that from the urban forestry staff for $100 is probably one of the biggest bargains in town. As a matter of fact, when it comes to appeal, you know, I'm all for making appeal more expensive because I don't, I'd rather not see people go there. I'd rather see them understand that, you know, it's about the code. It's not about anything else. So, you know, there's a lot that comes on. And I have had people, appellants at appeal hearings say, I cannot believe, and Damon might remember this too, I cannot believe how much free tree advice I just got at this hearing. So, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into a tree removal permit oftentimes. And I think for $100, I don't know how that could be reduced personally. And, you know, I don't like fees either, any more than I like taxes. But, you know, when, you know, I mean, after 34 years in the government, I mean, we ended up, you know, there's a big, you know, user pays issue there. It's like, if you're not using the service, well, okay. But if you're going to use the campground, if you're going to use the, you know, the services provided, whatever it might be, you know, there has to be some remuneration for, you know, back to the city for that.
Thanks, Barbara. Well taken. Yeah, I see this in my day job most of the time in the university too. It's very similar challenges, especially with tuition increases and things, and what students are experiencing right now with a lot of precarity. So it's, yeah, it's interesting models that we have set up for some of these systems that might be, yeah, that we're kind of in, but we're trying to find ways, creative ways to address them, especially given the uneven playing field that we have with a lot of this stuff. Kind of, Brian, do you kind of, is there anything that you need from the commissioners? Have we kind of vetted this a little? Do you have any further questions or anything like that that you want input on? Are we good?
No, I think that covers it. I appreciate all the feedback. Definitely appreciate the issues raised, and yeah, I think that covers it for this. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I'd like to transition a little bit in our last couple of items here. Is just see if you have endurance to take on two hefty items here. One is the appeals board, which Barbara, I've been going back and forth on by email, has offered to give us a little context about the appeals board. We have two new commissioners, and part of the discussion here is kind of getting membership on the appeals board and kind of keeping this conversation going in terms of how and what are the specific duties. The new commissioners aren't here, but it's something that we brought up during the interview, and they both expressed interest in potentially participating. And I understand that there might be a transition in the appeals board. I think Megan might be transitioning off the appeals board. So I want to really kind of think about how, open this up to see if there's others who would like to participate. Right now, Barbara and Damon and Megan are the members of the appeals board.
And Jeanette.
And Jeanette, thank you. I thought so as well. I didn't remember. 4 folks on the appeals board. Megan, I think, is transitioning off, and just want to open it up to you all to see if there's members of the commission who might want to step up for this. There's advantages that you all have that I think new commissioners might not, given the insights that you've heard in our conversations, deliberations, but at the same time, coming in with a new fresh set of eyes might also open up some ideas for the appeals board. So want to just create some space for us to have a conversation about membership on the appeals board and whether you might consider yourself as a potential member coming up. And Barbara, would you give a little background on the appeals board so we also get it in the minutes, and that way the new commissioners can get an idea for, it's written in title, there's material in Title 11 as well. So just to have your perspective as someone who's been on it for seven years or so.
Yeah. Yeah, the appeals was a committee until January 1st of 2015 when Title 11 was passed. And then it became a board, and it's written in the code. It is one of the 2 subgroups of the Urban Forestry Commission that are required. Everything else is at the, is what the Urban Forestry Commission wants to create and then sundown as they have those needs. And so the appeals board is 5 individuals, and it is governed kind of by the code and by the rules of procedure, which are on Urban Forestry's website. And the rules of procedure have been through 2 attorneys. And so that is how we operate, if you should want to review them. So an appeal is basically an action that may be pursued when a property owner disagrees or an applicant disagrees with the city decision. And so they file for a tree removal permit, is usually what it is, and the city disagrees, and there are criteria in the code that the city follows, and they do it strictly by the code. And so they use the code and they send a letter to the appellant at that point, the applicant for the tree removal permit, and then they lay out which parts of the code are used to deny the tree removal. And there are some other kinds of permits, but not to get too far into the weeds here. So at that point, if they decide that they want to pursue an appeal, the tree, so there is a review process and an inspection, and I have found the city inspectors to be absolutely great to work with, as is Casey, who oversees that part of urban forestry. And Jen as well. She's also quite involved. And so when they file for an appeal, there is a second review process, and sometimes even more review processes following that. So by the time it gets to the appeals board, it's been looked at by a number of people. And again, when the subsequent reviews are done, it's by the code. And so the appeal is another way that the 5 people that are on the appeals board look at the city's decision. The appeals board is an error correcting body. So the role is to see if the city forester, who ultimately, that's where the buck stops, the city forester made an error in how the code was applied. So, and if the city forester didn't make an error, the appeals board goes with the city forester, and some people are okay with that. Some people are kind of like, well, I tried. Other people are not so happy. So, some people don't see it as the outcome they wanted. So to be on the appeals board, you must be a member of the Urban Forestry Commission. You can't, so the other committee that is in the code is the Heritage Tree Committee, and the Heritage Tree Committee can have non-commissioned members, but the appeals board cannot. And so everybody that's making this decision has an appointment and has been through a process. And then there's also a training session, so that usually our attorney will explain the legal part of it. And then I'm usually involved in that to explain the process of the hearing, so that when they get there, people kind of know how it's going. The appeals board decision is final. You can't go to your county commissioner, you can't go to, or your city commissioner, you can't go to the mayor. And, even if you don't like the decision, if you don't like the decision, you can consult a legal counsel, and you can take the city to court. And that has not happened. And when I started, the attorney that was there at the time, who was around when the tree code Title 11 was in process of being developed, and through it being implemented and signed by council, he told me, he said, your job is to put together a case that's good enough that I can defend it in court if I have to. And so far, that's not happened. And I think the process has evolved. Oftentimes we, there's a presentation by the city, there's a presentation by the appellant. The appeals board asks questions of both of those parties. Sometimes we deliberate amongst ourselves. It's a public hearing, but it's not a public process. So there are no public comments taken. If an appellant wants to have their neighbor up there to boost their confidence, that's not, the neighbor has not a role in this. This is between the applicant or appellant and the city, and it's about the code. So, so one gets to know the code rather well. And the appeal is based on the conditions at the time that the inspection is done. So it does not mean that in a year that the conditions might not be different and that they can't reapply. But I guess that's, I guess one more thing is that there are trees that are now in the city that were not, that were okay to be planted when they were planted, but they are no longer on the planting list, the tree planting list, the approved tree planting list. And since the trees are there, even though we might not plant them today, they are part of the tree canopy, and just because they're not on the approved tree planting list now does not mean that they are removed. They still need to follow the criteria and the review factors. They need to be dead, dying, dangerous, etc. You know, you can't just, or Jen would remember this one, famous words of, well, I never liked sweet gums, so so I'm voting against them. It's not about what we like, it's about the code. So does that, is there anything I missed? Anybody?
No, that's great. Thank you, Barbara. I see Jen's hand up.
Yeah, I want to remember Joe Paraski, because he was somebody who did not like the sweet gum. So remembering Joe, but also Barbara. Wow, what a great, thorough description for getting everyone on the same page. One thing I wanted to clarify: there is no heritage tree committee in code. The code section on heritage trees is that the Forestry Commission recommends listing or delisting to City Council, and that's all. And in fact, there has not always been a heritage tree committee. There have been staff doing that work to bring it to commission, and the whole commission has reviewed and decided whether to list on the forester's recommendation. So just that, different topic, so we don't need to get into it, but just to be clear.
Thank you.
And you know, you're the appeals board chair. We don't expect you to know heritage.
So opening it up for appeals board discussion, any clarifications, any interest in participation? Just want to open it up to you all, and then I'll go to take your comments to new commissioners if there's nothing here. Bruce.
Oops. Yeah, I'm interested in exploring it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Noted. Great. Damon, anything to add, appeals board, or Megan?
I think that Barbara did a very thorough job of explaining it. So I've got nothing.
All right. Thanks. You know your stuff, Barbara. Greg.
I recall I've brought up a couple times over the past year or two just sort of the need to plan for succession on the Urban Forestry Commission itself. I'd like to get an updated list of that, because I believe Brian was checking back, because there were some of us that started with only partial terms. But I imagine somewhere in the back of Barbara's mind is the fact that she's been the chair of this committee for quite some time. She, I, and Damon all in theory are scheduled to leave the commission next February.
Yep.
It doesn't mean in case of the Heritage Tree Committee that Damon and I wouldn't stay on there. In fact, Brian left the Urban Forestry Commission and remains on the Heritage Tree Committee. But it's a real issue for the Appeals Committee, particularly since appeals come pretty irregularly. And there's, not
Appeals board.
appeals board, sorry, isn't always the chance to actually learn much about it beforehand. So I would like to get that kind of update because we've just taken a long time to get our 2 new commissioners, and looks like you're going to be right back to recruiting again.
All right, thanks, Greg. Okay. Well, that will, we're right back caught up with our time. So thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Jen. We'll just keep this, we'll note this, all that's been said so far, and then kind of follow up. I'll follow up with Brian and Jen and Barbara about the appeals board, next steps, and kind of go from there. Let's, we have a little bit of time since the appeal, speaking of which, since the appeal canceled today, I'd like to just spend a little bit of time on the bylaws that we left off with last time. As you might recall, we were looking to a section about the specific committees within the overall UFC, and a way to kind of we're essentially looking to vote on approving the bylaws. That's really where we left off. And I think last time we didn't have enough time to really flesh it out as much as we would like. I know the policy committee meeting, as I recall from seeing an email, had an opportunity to maybe discuss this a little bit. So I want to maybe start there and see if there's anything that might emerge from a conversation. If anything, I don't know if there's anything there, but just want to start, if there's a discussion that we could start with the policy committee and Daniel specifically, in terms of the bylaws and the way that we're thinking about the subcommittees within the bylaws. And I had put the language up, and Brian, I wonder if we could put that language up. It was specific to just, I think, like 3 or even 2 sentences within the bylaws that we wanted to have a conversation about. Thanks, Brian. I'll put that up in a minute. But just to follow up with that, does anybody want to start that conversation about where we might want more clarification about the bylaws and what it might say about subcommittees? Daniel, you look like you're either speaking to me or someone else.
I was just wondering, you had asked about the policy committee. We did discuss this. And I think at our committee, and Bruce, you can jump in too here, but I think everybody pretty much agreed with Ann Jeanette's comment from the last meeting, which was, if people are spending their time coming to subcommittee meetings, that they should be allowed to vote at subcommittees, especially since all we're really doing at subcommittees is voting whether or not to move something to the main Urban Forestry Commission, where it's going to get voted on again. So I think that was everybody's at the policy committee. That's what everybody was thinking. Bruce, does that kind of match your memory? Okay.
Yeah, so I guess there's a subtle piece on that in terms of membership of those subcommittees. So they're showing up, and so we're talking about a means by which there's a membership and process even. Is that right?
So at the policy committee, we did talk about the issue, okay, we need to come up with our own bylaws, including membership. So we're aware that we need to come up with some guidelines there that are in writing and agreed upon. Jen had expressed some concerns about how do you get a diverse group of people on your committee and those sorts of things. So I think we're going to start on that process. So also, I wish we would get rid of the term subcommittee,
Mhm.
I do not know where the heck that came from, but I don't believe it came from anybody at Urban Forestry, the Urban Forestry Commission, the Policy Committee, the Heritage Tree Committee. I
Or
think
the
that,
appeals
I don't know,
board.
or the board, yeah.
Yeah. We call it a committee. That's right. That's right. Okay. Barbara.
So just a quick comment is that since the rules of procedure for the appeals board have been through 2 attorneys, you could start there and just crib it and take what you want and then add, subtract, whatever. But there is a process. There is a set number of members. There's a way to get on and there's a, recognized list. So, because if non commission members are voting, it has to be clear and probably publicly clear for the open meetings law who they are and that they are at the meeting or not at the meeting and how the vote will be counted, members present, whatever the situation is, but that might be a place to start.
Thanks, Barbara. Something for policy committee to deliberate. That's great. So I've heard so far, get rid of subcommittee to committee. I've heard that membership language needs to be brought in. Brian has put up the language in the chat here. I see Jen's hand.
Yeah, really appreciated the discussion, and I'm going to go back to whoever it was, Bruce's comment or Daniel's comment about Anjanette's comment. People put in the energy to come to a committee meeting, then why wouldn't they be able to vote? And ultimately, it's really for the commission's decision. And I understand and appreciate that. I'm going to present a flip side, a different perspective on that. And that is our commission and our committees continue to be pretty homogeneous in terms of who's on them and the interests that are represented. And we all know that recruitment is challenging and continues to be challenging to get a diverse representation of Portlanders involved. And while it's great to have committee participation and have them able to vote, one could say that there's kind of a lobbying effect that we see at like the federal government level, for example, where if it's all one perspective or a similar perspective being brought and there's not a diversity of opinions in the room, and that's the recommendation that goes forward, those are often the recommendations that can tend to carry, especially if those recommendations or that contemplation in the group doesn't necessarily reflect the breadth of opinions, and things are missed and left out. And it's hard to expect those later in the process to pick up on those and represent the other perspectives in the decisions they make. And when our commission continues to be, as I said, homogeneous, that will be even more challenging. So what I'm going to say is if the decision is that the committees with set membership guidance, written guidance, reported notes that are on a website, all of those things that must come with open meetings law and just transparency, assuming those are there, as a commission, I think the need will be for you all to really focus on broad representation and thinking when you're making a vote on something, being very sensitive to the fact that you are representing the entire community, and things like that racial equity lens that I mentioned earlier and other types of equity trainings and those types of thought process become more important to integrate directly into the commission's work. That's all.
Great. Thanks for that, Jen. So yeah, as we think about, this is an opportunity whenever these bylaws come up is to really think about the DEI dimensions of this work, and not saying anyone isn't, but that just is a great reminder. Okay, so if I'm hearing this correctly, I mean, we really are looking at that language in the chat here as the kind of crux of our conversation in order to be able to get to a vote. And I believe, Brian, we need to vote on this. Is that right? Approval of the bylaws?
I think what we'll do is what I've been hoping for is to get a sense of if there is sort of a shared opinion on the commission of how they would like these drafted. And then I'll make the actual text changes to the bylaws And then we can hold a vote probably at next month's meeting. It was really just making sure that I know it's been a topic for quite a few months, and I think we haven't really reached a point where everyone was on the same page and sort of how to approach it. So I think as long as we kind of get a general direction that everyone's comfortable with, I can update the bylaws, give everyone a little more time just to review them, and then the next meeting we would just hold a vote.
Yeah, I might just add, there's one thing that keeps coming up is we have a lot of autonomy as to what committees we want to create, right? Like that's not in any way set. So there's no process we've come up with like how we're going to, as an entity, like advance a specific committee or shall be like to dissolve a specific committee. So that's just one comment I have in terms of the kind of creative and destructive forces that we have at our ability. So let me go, Megan, Daniel, Barbara.
Yeah, the one thought I just have in line with some of what was just shared too is in terms of recruitment and the homogenous nature of our commission, and is, you know, to the larger part of like who gets to participate on our committees, you know, I think then a question could be raised is who does the recruitment for our committees as well. So if we want to have more broad-based voices on those committees, it would be great to utilize the apparatus of urban forestry as well, like we did recently for the commission, to see if we could bring in some more voices. So just saying that if that, you know, to that point, like, then it would be great. Let's bring in those more dynamic voices to our committees. So just saying that if that is a problem, let's, you know, I like to solve for problems. So let's then maybe think about how we can recruit for those.
Okay, thanks, noted, Megan. Daniel.
Megan, I want to thank you for that comment, because that's certainly a question I've had too. You know, we're all volunteers, and do we have the resources individually to mount a citywide outreach campaign to get these more diverse voices? I think it'd be great, maybe at some future Urban Forestry Commission meeting, maybe Jen, if we could talk about what resources the city may have, Parks and Rec, that we could tap into as individual members to help with this recruitment. I think that would be really great. Before getting to this question about are we ready to vote on bylaws, I think we've only talked about this one issue, and certainly the bylaws is a lot bigger than this issue. And one of the things that occurs to me is, Brian, I believe there's a change in the bylaws that relates to people's term of office and that type of thing. Aren't we switching somehow to trying to make more staggered terms and that type of thing? Because I think there's definitely an issue I'd like to bring up around that, which is next year, Greg, Barbara, and Damon are all going to term off, our most, our senior members. I'm also going to term off after only 5 years or 4 years, 4.5 or something, because of the change in the way the staggering is going to be going. So we're potentially going to have a big change all in 1 year. And I'm wondering, is there something we could do with the bylaws to maybe help kind of make sure we don't lose all of our senior people at once, and how we might work on that? So I just wanted to raise that.
Yeah, and so it's actually in code that commissioners serve up to 2 4-year terms. Daniel, the situation that you're referring to it's basically a bit of a change from, I think, a pre-Title 11 to post-Title 11, where the practice used to be if a commissioner ended their term early, whoever their replacement would be would first fill in the remainder of that term. And so what we've kind of changed since then is simply when a new commissioner comes on board, they will just start their 4-year term. So Daniel, your position is sort of in the middle of that transition, and it creates a little bit of a question of, are you actually eligible for another 4-year term because your first one was just completing someone else's term? And so it is a little bit complicated and unnecessarily confusing, and I think we have it resolved at this point, but your position is one which was sort of in that transition period. So I will talk to Tony about that, but the bylaws really just point to Title 11 because Title 11 establishes terms.
Right, so Title 11 is really just the total amount of time you can spend, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I see Jen's hand up.
Yeah, I see Jen's
mine
hand up.
jumped in early.
That's in response, and then Barbara.
Yeah, it just responds to Megan and Daniel's comment. We're happy to help with recruitment, but I want to manage expectations. We've been busting tail to try to get a diverse commission, and even done things like changing meeting times and trying to get folks some kind of compensation for their work, and it still remains really challenging. So it will always take all of us. And also in terms of recruiting for a committee, happy to do that too. However, I would want to see structures in place about membership and decision making, and recording meetings and those being posted for public transparency, as you've been talking about.
Okay, great. Barbara.
So I have a question about the process, but before I ask that, I just wanted to second what Bruce said and what Daniel said, in that we don't have subcommittees. We have a commission, and we have committees, and we have a board. We don't have a subcommittee would be a committee under one of our committees, and we don't have any of those. So just, you know, I think, you know, Brian, when you go through this, you might want to note, because I noticed that subcommittees in there numerous times. The other thing is that I do think, as Daniel said, that I think it was Daniel that said that we need something about, you know, how you get on a committee, how you get off a committee, the membership, maybe the total number, you know, that kind of thing. So then my question, Brian, is that, you know, we're looking at, you know, the bylaws as they sit right this minute. So what is the process to, you know, are you going to go do some more writing and then we're going to get another look? I mean, how is this going to unfold? I'm not clear.
Yeah, so we've looked at these bylaws. I think this is maybe the 5th or 6th meeting we've had, and we have reviewed them fully. And over the course of those, this is the one issue where there hasn't been agreement. So the way that I view it, the rest of the bylaws, everyone seems to be okay with. It's this one issue of committee membership that remains. And so ideally we would come away with a consensus in this meeting, and then I would just write in the changes to the bylaws, make sure Tony has reviewed them and is okay with them. But within that, the way that I'm envisioning this is the commission would still be determining who is a member of the committee. So I think the commission would still want to be, if the commission is delegating any of its responsibility to a committee, it would want to be approving and stating who those members are, so that it's not a situation where just anyone who shows up at a committee is now a member and can vote. I think we'd want to have a structure around it. So the process is, if once we've concluded this meeting, I'll make those changes to the bylaws, send them to everyone for one last review, and then next month we'll vote.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, Greg.
I put it in the chat, and I'm not going to repeat the stuff I said last month. It would be in the minutes, I guess, that we'll get next month. But I did send the membership in just a brief outline of the skills and what the Heritage Tree Committee members bring to the process. And I also mentioned how much time they spent. I think the policy committee meeting every month is probably broadly equivalent. I just can't see letting them not vote. So I would like in the next meeting to have the draft language that I put in the chat be considered as at least one alternative.
Okay.
And I should note the Heritage Tree Committee does do minutes. Actually, I do them for the committee. And eventually we get around to voting. I'm usually reviewing them the next time we meet. But it's in a regular schedule, so it can be, 2 months, sometimes 3 months. We've never posted them, but certainly we could. But I think it would be like, frankly, this commission meetings where the meetings are often, a month or 2 or 3 behind.
Yeah. I guess I'm wondering, is there any, I mean, we're trying to standardize things, right? That's what the bylaws are trying to do across the entire city. And so I'm wondering from any of you if there's a reason to think about whether it be the heritage tree or the policy committee and maybe the appeals board, but really thinking, is there a reason to have any variation in that process of membership, recruitment, based on the nature of the committee itself? Like, do we want to kind of maintain some level of balance between the standardization and the kind of tailoring for committees as needed? I have to just step out to grab something really quick. Sorry.
I think you should just leave. I think you should just leave the appeals board off, because the appeals board, the code says that they can create rules of procedure, and that's what's been done. And the appeals board operates differently. So it could even say and I think it should actually say in the bylaws that the appeals board operates, using the code and the rules of procedure, because that's what applies to the appeals board. I think the committees would be a different situation, and whether that wants to be standardized, whether we all would want it to be standardized or not, I think is up for discussion.
I think on the Heritage Tree Committee, I think you really do want people with some tree knowledge, not just general members of the public who are trying to figure out how they can plug in. I think the policy committee should be wide open, but I really think on the Heritage Tree Committee, you want a level of expertise there. And I think the current membership, or at least what Greg has talked about, I think that's what they've got. And I think that's excellent.
I want to present a different perspective from Bruce's, and that is that, again, the Heritage Tree Committee isn't required, and we always are obligated to have staff involved to make sure that the arboricultural perspective is covered. So I tend to look at Heritage Tree Committee more as a very, very capable vehicle for elevating people involved in them. The broader the participation at the committee level, the more beneficial. Just a different way of looking at it.
I guess Vivek's not here to let other people speak again, but I will point out that Urban Forestry staff did help us in our last recruitment, and they worked really hard with ideas I had not even thought of to do outreach. And even given that, we ended up only able to improve geographical outreach. We're still all white. We're pretty much balanced between male and female, but it's not like everybody's got the time or energy or interest. So I got to point out though, and maybe this is contrary to Jen, but at this point, as this is written, none of the Urban Forestry staff would actually have a vote. Damon and I would have the votes as the only Urban Forestry Commission members on the Heritage Tree Committee.
Yeah, if I could speak to that.
The alternative processes that we could have, which would be that the Heritage Tree Committee could vote as normally, and then Damon and I would basically vote to pass that on. But it didn't seem particularly transparent or honest.
I wanted to follow up on the staff voting. But before I do, transparency and accountability, as well as consistency, which Vivek mentioned before, are really important for whatever rules you all come up with. So, but yeah, Greg, you know, before, when we get the applications for heritage trees, there's a lot of vetting that happens. There's, you know, we have staff who significant parts of their work plan are around heritage trees. So before something comes to the Heritage Tree Committee, it's already been pretty thoroughly reviewed by staff. And to keep the lines straight between advice to the city and the city performing its role, I would not want staff to be voting. We do our part before that. And it's really for the Heritage Tree Committee to bring forward to the commission. If we continue to have a Heritage Tree Committee, which it sounds like y'all are interested in doing.
Sorry, I had to step out for just 1 second. Yeah, I might have missed something, but I presume this is membership discussion that's going on. And so in terms of committees more generally, the question I was posing is the process for creating and dissolving committees. In general, is there any, the bylaws are essentially giving us autonomy to do that, I think. And so is there anything we want to bring up about if a commissioner feels really, you know, strongly about a particular committee helping to support the kinds of obligation or responsibilities that we have as a commission, then we can, of course, bring that up as an agenda item in our meetings and we can have a discussion of it. But what I'd like to know is, do we want to be silent on that, or do we want to allow that to kind of form organically, or do we want to kind of put something down in, can we put something down in the bylaws if we want to create and dissolve committees? So that's just a more general question.
Yeah, I think I'll just jump in and say I think that the intention of the bylaws is that the commission would vote to create each committee and create a clear purpose for it. I think that can be more clear though in the bylaws. So I think that's an additional change that I can make.
Barbara? You're muted, sorry. Pretty good at lip reading, but not that good.
Thank you. I think if non-commission members are voting, and I don't have any problem with them voting, I think if they are voting, there has to be some form around that, because I think that's what the city would look for. You just can't have just any old person. I've been coming to 3 meetings. Why can't I vote? I mean, I think there has to be some form and structure to that so that the city knows where that's coming from. And certainly what, you know, when that vote happens, then what comes forward comes from a commission, you know, a commission member. But I think we either decide that they're going to vote and we put some form around it, or we decide they're not going to vote, which I think there's a lot of problem with that.
So that's essentially saying that each committee is going to come up with a process that's really distinct about membership and then as a result voting. Yeah.
Am I still muted or not?
No,
no, that's the way it was when I started. Every committee had a set of bylaws, and we had an admin staff person who went after us, you know, with a whip to redo our bylaws, just to make sure that, you know, that this was a part of the program and it was structured and it wasn't just invented on a napkin on the fly. I mean, yeah. She really tracked us, and, you know, she would send out emails constantly about where are your bylaws. And Jen would remember.
Yeah, so the way the new bylaws are written is it says that these bylaws, as well as the Oregon Public Records laws, apply to any committee created by the commission. So it's possible a committee could see those bylaws as covering things like quorum and voting that they're concerned about. I think it'd be perfectly fine if there were sort of additional procedures that they want to formalize through their own bylaws. And as long as they don't contradict the UFC's bylaws, I think that's perfectly fine. The Heritage Tree Committee is a great example of one that has a much more detailed process of how they do their work. And so formalizing that in some way is great.
All right. Good. Anything more you need or want to discuss, Brian? I mean, I don't want to chase after you per se, but I think in terms of getting the structures, but I think it is something that's really timely at this point. And next meeting, if we're planning on voting on this language, we'll want to make sure we have everything at least vetted at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like that the commission is looking to see bylaws that allow for non-members to vote on the committees, but that the commission would still be the full commission be voting to create those committees and to formalize who are the members of them. Is that how I'm hearing everything? Okay.
Okay, I've seen a lot of nodding heads.
And I think it's in there, Brian, and we can work on it more, but making sure it's clear that the public meetings laws have to be abided by and that they're going to be minutes or notes kept and posted, all that stuff, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Good. I think that brings us around to the end of the meeting. We're early. We're not trying to push that clock. So any other business, any other items that commissioners want to bring up in either thinking about future meetings or other questions that come up? I want to make sure if we can get out here early, great, but make sure we're covering anything in the upcoming meetings. I know we have this discussion next week about the bylaws. Yeah, Bruce.
Oops.
Next month.
I wanted to throw out the idea of having non-voting members of the Urban Forestry Commission who are representative of the groups we don't have represented. The youth group, the Hispanic community, various other groups, the Native American, as a way perhaps to get more involvement, but at least to say we're welcoming you. Can you come voluntarily participate? You won't be able to vote, but it's an active thing besides just recruiting people who don't get appointed or for whatever reason they can't join. So something a little more affirmative than what we've been doing. Just an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, until I go back to until there's some form of, I don't know what it is, remuneration or something for participation. It's really, I mean, volunteer committees are really hard pressed to be able to get that kind of broad scale participation. Keeps coming back to that challenge. But I appreciate that, Bruce. Thank you. Yeah, Greg?
You know, this outreach process for the Urban Forestry Commission itself lasted, I don't know, 6 months or so. I'm just curious, without naming names or anything, how many people applied, and if you at least got the diversity in applicants you would have got regarding their, you know, disregarding maybe their actual skills.
Mm-hmm. Great question. And the answer is we didn't get a diverse applicant pool. I think the number was good. What did we end up with, Brian? 15?
Yeah, it was 12 or 15, and really great applicants in terms of passion and, you know, desire to do this kind of work. But I think it's an area of improvement for us still.
Yeah, and I want to add too, you know, Brian and I and some other folks on our team, we have our own Urban Forestry Diversity and Equity Committee, have really thought about and researched and worked on this topic for the commission, but also for all of the other ways that we have people involved, including staff. And I'm at the place now where we're really looking for guidance and assistance from our bureau and elsewhere in the city. And that's one of the ways that's been manifested is this idea of compensation for serving. So not exactly volunteer, to really recognize that it is a service, that it takes time and effort from people and that they deserve to be compensated for it. And that's something we have heard from BIPOC community groups in Portland, that they should be compensated. But that is something the city can't do yet or isn't ready to do yet. So that's one example of, I guess what I'd say is this will be a long ongoing effort, and there aren't really easy answers that I see.
So I have to just kind of respond saying that, that's for the Urban Forestry Commission itself, which, we're all proud to serve on it. It's a real honor. It's even harder at the committee level to get the results that we would like. So, and I appreciate Bruce's ideas. I think that might be a way to get people interested in some other forms of service, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, and it applies also, Greg, for urban forestry and I think all other city work groups in volunteers, in programs, who participates in programs, who does not. I know one of the big efforts we have in parks right now is to figure out how in recreation programs to really make them available to folks who aren't participating now and figuring out why they're not. So it's a whole realm of work really that our culture in the US hasn't done a lot on at this point, but now there's a demand for it. So we got to hurry it up.
There's just so many things to be engaged with right now. It's kind of overwhelming for a lot of people. And I think we have a proliferation of organizations as well as activities. I know there's an entirely new tree group emerge, or one of many, I imagine, emerging. They were going with the Urban Forest Collaborative, and I quickly reminded them that that acronym is similar to another one that's also part of a forestry commission in the city. And so they've rebranded themselves, I think, and continuing that conversation to create a third space, kind of a boundary space for conversations that are happening, not necessarily with folks that are invested in this for policy purposes or for monetary or income, but a third space for discussion more generally with community groups and bringing lots of those stakeholders, rights holders together. So I know there's a lot of interest in this. It's just we're working with several more organizations interested in trees and canopy. So yeah, Daniel.
So I would like to offer a completely different perspective on this whole issue of diversifying the voices and committees and bylaws. And that is, I think we're still using this same paradigm that's been used in government in the dominant culture for many, many years, which is if you want input, you ask the people to come to you and to come to your meetings, right? And by having this idea of we're going to have official committee membership roles, we're buying right into that. I think if we really want these diverse voices, we've got to go to the groups where the people are, instead of asking them necessarily to come to our meetings. So just a thought, I don't necessarily have an answer, but one of the things at our last policy committee meeting, I think it was the last one, Bruce, we talked a little bit about this whole issue of how do we get more diverse voices. And we talked about things like, for instance, reaching out to Apano maybe and seeing if one of us could go visit one of their meetings and kind of talk about what the Urban Forestry Commission does and see, at those meetings where people feel more comfortable because they're in meetings they're more familiar with, just kind of throwing out, do you have any concerns maybe we could bring back about trees and urban forest issues? So just that whole idea about you go to them instead of asking them to come to you, which kind of makes it difficult to talk about who is an official committee member. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out because I think it's something we should talk about.
Great point, Daniel. Really appreciated that. Really appreciate that. And so, yeah, this I don't want to. Yeah, this is something. I don't think it's a I don't think it needs to be brought in necessarily into the bylaws per se, but it might be a procedural thing that's internal for committees to think about. And I mean, I floated the idea some time ago to even think about taking, we've talked about this, taking the commission meetings to parts of town and to engage with organizations as well. And so that's a whole other discussion that we started a while ago. I appreciate you bringing it around full circle. Yeah, let's keep that conversation going, at least starting with the committees. And if you come up with some ideas, let's bring it out to the whole group. Thank you. All right, everyone, we're pretty much at time. Brian, have I missed anything? Is there something else?
I was just going to say two final things. One is I appreciate all of you sticking it out for multiple bylaws conversations. It's not the most engaging and enthralling part of your work, but it's important, and I really do appreciate the amount of time and effort put into that. And the other thing is, with that issue kind of resolved, it really frees us up for future agenda items. So if you have anything that you'd like to see come to the commission in the next few months, please shoot me any email, and Vivek, Jen, and I will get working on that. So thanks, everyone.
Hey, Megan, quick comment?
Yes, Megan.
It's a very quick comment on that, but it ties into both what you just said, Brian, and Daniel. Is I also think that agenda items also, it may be, I don't want to critique us for what we talk about, but it also may be that community members don't see themselves into the space of our agenda. So it could also involve finding out from the community what they would, what are also priorities, because they might, maybe they don't feel super excited about our content. Not that it's not exciting, but just to complicate that conversation as well.
Mhm.
We could always think about like having a community input forum of some kind for a session. And I mean, really centering some of that, one of our, or multiple times throughout the year or something like that. We'll think about it. That's a great point. Thank you, Megan.
Exploring these ideas could be a great agenda item or item, right? I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Spring would be a good time to do that too. Well, let's follow up on that, Jen and Brian. That'd be great. Love that idea. Well, happy Earth Month. Happy Earth Day next week, and happy Arbor Day at the end of the month. All kinds of fun stuff with trees going on, including their most incredible, like I've just been struck by the beauty of trees right now. Like it's been a long winter. And so coming into sunny skies here, at least here in Portland, if you're here. I'm not in Joshua Tree, and nor does this background resemble anything of what the Northwest will look like due to climate change. But it is a spring break trip I took. It was a lot of fun in a van, and loving to see these trees these days. So take good care. We'll see you next time, and be well. Right.
Water your cedars.
Yeah.
Water all of them.
Water all of them.